Are you interested in additional ways to treat and prevent COVID? I'm going to share in this video an important and overlooked treatment. How are you dealing with this pandemic? Well, I want to again focus us on the 4 areas of this pandemic that I think we should look at. And the reason is because long term, I'm afraid we're going to see viruses again or variants or whatever. Remember, we've talked in other videos about the importance of your own immune system, getting it as strong as we can. We need to do research in this area to see if there's other things that we can add to keep this immune system functioning at the optimal level. Second, if you get sick, we need to jump on it quick. We need to develop medicines, test the medicines, see what works the best. We're working on this. We haven't done as much of that as I like. Thirdly, we need to work on acquired immunity. And that comes from vaccines and your own acquired immunity. And lastly, and each of these are equally important, lastly, we need to focus on which groups would benefit the most from these treatments. Who's at the greatest risk? Who should we focus on? Who should we put in the hospital? Who should we treat with this medicine or that medicine? Well, each of these arms have to, in my opinion, be focused on vigorously and aggressively, because if we don't do it now, history will repeat itself. We're going to have another virus down the road, and then we're going to be literally in the same boat we're in now. So what is one physiologic treatment that might be overlooked, that we might not be adding to this regimen, this 4-part regimen that I outlined, that might improve our immune system, that might be used to treat the acute infection, that might help us with acquired immunity? Well, I want to share with you a text, and that's Exodus 23, verse 25. So you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from you. So this says that the God of the universe, when you serve him, when you worship him, he will bless the things you eat, the things you drink, and he will take sickness away in the midst of you. That's a promise. That's a biblical prescription. He doesn't say how to do it, but he gives us a clue that when we serve him, when we worship him, this will happen at some point in our lives. Years ago, I read this book, and I thought it was an excellent book. And this is by Francis Collins, and he's at the National Institute of Health, and it's called The Language of God. And his group helps sequence the entire DNA, our genetic template. What makes us function the way we do? And he named that, this is the language of God, because in looking how our DNA and what controls it works, we can learn about God. Well, this opened up lots in the scientific community. All of a sudden, we had tools to study things, at least in our environment, that affected our DNA, which affects our entire body. Now, remember, everything that we put into our body has a physiologic effect. The thoughts, that changes our chemistry. The food, the exercise, the sleep, the water, the worries, everything changes everything. So nothing lives in a vacuum. So the DNA is involved in all of these physiologic reactions. A lot of my patients come in and say, oh, I want a pill for this, but they can make a lifestyle change and have equally aggressive changes physiologically, especially when it comes to nutrition and exercise and now mental health. So Francis Collins got this area of research rolling. And then a few years later, Andrew Newberg at the University of Pennsylvania wrote this book, and I was fascinated by it. It was How God Changes Your Brain. And he, in this study, showed that just the physiological act of worship for 10 minutes a day changes the part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It decreased stress chemistry. It made the prefrontal cortex grow so we could think better. It turned down some of the stress chemistry that turns on adrenaline, some of these cytokines that we're scared about nowadays, and it helped our immune system and our thinking system make better decisions and deal with life better. So that's what Andrew Newberg came up with. And Herbert Benson, he wrote this book, Timeless Healing. And his research throughout his life has focused around how things like relaxation and deep breathing and spiritual practices changes our physiology. Well, we now have the technology to show how these things that affect the software, which we call the epigenetics, affect the hardware to change our physiology. Well, I was fascinated about this to a great deal. So I started wondering whether worship in itself could be a treatment for chronic disease, to prevent aging, and also to slow down and prevent some of the effects of COVID. So let's think about this as we go back to those arms. Could worship help our immune system? Absolutely. Worship cuts down stress, cuts down cytokines, helps us feel better, helps us have a greater well-being with endorphins. We all know that people that go to church have greater longevity. People and have relationships do better. Could it be used to actually treat a COVID infection? Well, that has not been proven, but if you think about improving your immune system, if you think about the peace that you get from knowing that God's going to take care of you and turning down some of that worry that you have and lack of sleep, indirectly, it could help that as well. We know that it probably enhances your immune system. So I could make the argument that worship helps lots of physiology, especially in the brain. And the studies, especially by Dusek, and he published in PLOS One, he did a study where people relaxed and just did some simple things, and he saw the chemistry remarkably improve. Newberg showed that worship helped the brain and the stress chemistry do better. And this worship is probably going to be a great way to prevent and treat and make us have less of these cytokines and dangerous immune substances that are hurting our body. It's going to help a lot our immune system. Helps us sleep better, helps us make better decisions, help us to eat better, helps us to have a sense of well-being and peace, because we know that no matter what, we have a God that loves us, that's going to save us, that's going to take care of us. So I'm very interested, and we're starting right now a worship study where we give people 10 minutes of worship a day, and we're going to study their genetics. This is biblical worship for 10 minutes a day, like the Newberg study. We're going to study them at day 1 and day 60. And that's how some of the original trials were done. And I'm sure that we're going to see dramatic changes on the epigenetics, the parts of the DNA that control oxidation and stress, the ones that treat chronic disease. So someday I'm hoping that we're going to have this study where we can say, you know, if you worship 10 minutes a day, biblical worship, if you do that, you're going to lower the chance of you having chronic disease. You're going to improve your immune system. You're going to slow down genetic aging. You're going to be able to make your immune system stronger. So worship might be, well, to me, it's the most important part of our treatment. Why is it important? Because it has physiologic changes, but it's got eternal changes. So even if we have bad genes that are going to wear out, we know that God's going to make everything right in His time. Now, if you're seeking clarity on God's leading through these challenging, confusing times, I want to challenge you to complete my 7-week Bible study, Biblical Prescriptions for Life. And also, if you're interested, you can look at the links below, and you're going to find ways you can plug into 10 minutes of worship on our app. It doesn't cost anything. You can download it. You can start worship every day for 10 minutes and see how it changes your life. If you like today's video, be sure you click the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of our future content. And thanks again for watching, and we'll chat again soon about more biblical prescriptions for life.